say goodbye to your American dream, because what was a slow and steady marathon for private equity to buy up all the family homes in America just hit absolute warp speed, and it is basically single family housing Armageddon. And for all of you that think your politicians, either Republican or Democrat, are coming to save you, let me go on ahead and get ahead of you there. The politicians you think you trust the most have gone full on Houdini or David Copperfield, holding bills out here like a red herring to keep you busy thinking they're coming to save you, while they're taking bribes back here, and I've got all the receipts. The politicians you trust the most are the ones taking those dollars. Let's get into it. Over the last 9 months, I have been screaming from the rooftops that the increase in private equity acquisitions of single family homes would be the bankrupting of the entirety of the working class of America. Lots of politicians have been saying they were acquiring 15% of homes or 16% of homes, 18% of homes. Some have even gone so far as to say 20% of homes in major markets. I've been saying at least 23%, but I thought it was higher. Unfortunately, when it comes to private equity, you can't see what they're doing. You can't see it because there's no regulatory agency that has insight into it, and there's no regulatory filing requirements for most private equity firms. However, there is ability to see tax documents, and the housing tax bills for last year are in, and we have got to say it is so much worse than any of us thought possible. That's right, folks. In the year of our Lord 2023, a full-on 44% of all single-family home purchases were by private equity firms. Do you understand how big a deal that is? Because for the last 9 months, everyone's been saying if they were buying about 20%, that would mean that by 2030, they were going to acquire 61% of all single-family homes. 61% by 2030. This is double that, which means we've hit warp speed, and we're going to get to that number much sooner than any economists predicted, at least out in the open.
Thank you for joining me, Empowered Investors Nationwide. I wanted to share with you a couple of quick charts. So first off, this is a build-to-rent company, Quinn Homes, and what they do is they have about 5,000 homes as a small institutional investor, and they build them to rent them. That's single purpose, right? Basically, they've done a comparison of monthly housing costs to show tenants that it's actually cheaper to rent their house than it is to go and buy the same house. And this isn't always true. Of course, it changes depending on prices at the time, rents at the time, and interest rates at the time, and of course, inflation and income. And hey, it's complicated, right? It's a complicated thing. But these charts are pretty telling. And so the first one shows that basically if you rent their home, and these are entry-level homes, the cost will be $2,085 per month. But if you buy the same home, not only do you have to put a down payment down, but the cost, according to them, and they have their way of doing their numbers, which you'll hear about on the upcoming episode, their cost estimate is $3,477. Of course, they've got PMI in there, private mortgage insurance, which is fairly expensive. And we as investors don't have to deal with that because we're always putting 20% down. And below 20% is when you have to pay for mortgage insurance to insure the lender against defaults. And that's kind of expensive. So that's the equation. But what is even more interesting is this historical cost of owning versus renting. But the historical information is pretty interesting as well. I do disagree with one part of it, and I'll share that with you in a moment. But I'm looking at a chart that starts at the year 2000 and goes on up to May of this year. And so we've got basically a quarter century of data here. And at certain times, it's been more expensive to purchase than to rent. And that's most of the time. And I do agree with that, generally speaking. Now, of course, it depends on the market. It depends on the price of the home. It's complicated. Like my favorite Facebook relationship status. It's complicated, okay? But interestingly, coming out of the Great Recession, according to their data, that is when it was cheaper to purchase than it was to rent. And I reported on this 10 years ago. I was, 10 to 14 years ago, I was reporting on this. And you can just go back and listen to those old episodes and hear what I said back then. That's the great thing about being able to hold me accountable because it's all just there, right? All the episodes are there, and if you listen to the Flashback Friday episodes, you get to hear those once a week too. So you can take me to task on my data and my forecasting over the last 21 years. So where I disagree though is his company, his data is showing that only 4 years were cheaper to purchase than to rent. And I don't think that's actually true. I think it was cheaper during the beginning of the COVID era. I think it was also a lot cheaper now. Their data shows that it was only 3% more expensive to purchase than rent, whereas in 2005, it was 48% more expensive to purchase than rent. And as of May of this year, it was 57% more expensive to purchase than rent. Now, always ask yourself, what am I not seeing? What am I not being told? I always say, you can't hear the dogs that don't bark. And you've also got to ask yourself life's most important question at all times. And that question, of course, is compared to what? So what are we not seeing here? Let's ask ourselves that question. Well, one of the things we're not seeing is we're not seeing the cost of a down payment, right? That has to be factored into the equation. We're also not seeing the value and the benefit of the investment of ownership, the appreciation, the tax benefits, et cetera, et cetera. Income property is a wonderful multidimensional asset, but so is owner-occupied ownership of property a multidimensional asset, even though it has fewer dimensions than wonderful income property rented to somebody else. But it still has multiple dimensions. It's not just about buy low, sell high. It's about many things, right? Buy low, sell high, get tax benefits, get leverage, get inflation-induced debt destruction, my trademark term, get all of these great benefits, right? And we've talked about that. But what you don't see here is some of that, and that's not factored into the equation. So what is the answer? What is the right thing to do? What is the action step, you ask Jason? Jason, what should I do with this information? Here's what you should do. This is the ideal situation, and it depends where you are on your journey of wealth creation. But if you are somewhat far along and you can afford a nice home, the ideal situation from a financial only perspective, well, not just financial only, there's a convenience factor too, is to rent a high-end home for yourself and buy lots of low-end entry-level rental properties that you rent to other people. That's the best deal. It's pretty much always been the best deal. There have been a few times where you should have bought the house you live in. And what else are we not being told by this data that I've just shared with you? Well, we're not being told what the price of the house is in the second chart, where we see this historical cost of owning versus renting. And they're saying only 4 years it's been cheaper to purchase than to rent. And I disagree. I think there's been a good 6 years in this quarter century that it's been cheaper to purchase than rent. They say 4. We'll agree to disagree on that. Not a big deal. Overall, mostly it's cheaper to rent. But again, that doesn't tell you everything because you don't get the investment benefit when you rent and you don't lock in your cost for 3 decades like you do with your mortgage. So there are definitely some benefits for that. They're just looking at it from the snapshot in time where you would make the decision to buy versus rent. They don't look at how that affected you 3 years from now, 5 years from now, which it's almost always better to own. But like I've said, you know me, I've moved around a bit. I'd like to move around a bit more. I really want to try living in some different cities. And I've enjoyed that, even though it's kind of a hassle, frankly. But, for many years, I wanted to leave Southern California. And I finally did. Everybody said I'd come back, and I didn't. And, you'll miss this place so much, Jason. You love Newport Beach. And I'm like, yeah, it's a great place, but I've had enough. And so I've really enjoyed living in some other places and, meeting lots of different friends and just being in a different environment. Some people crave that more than others. I guess I have a little bit of wanderlust in me still. And the convenience of being a renter, especially a renter of a high-end home, because the economic benefits are fantastic when you're renting a high-end home, but also the convenience of just being able to give 30 days notice and move and not have to deal with selling the property is pretty awesome. That's a pretty awesome convenience. Now, what if you have a big family? What if you have 19 kids? Okay. And, your community is your life, right? There are a lot of people like that. I get it. I understand that everything is not a financial or even a convenience decision. So, you may want to just put down roots and stay there a while. But just remember, as a renter, you can sign a long-term lease. In fact, this company likes to do 3-year leases, but they do what? They do escalations. 4% annual escalations are what they put into their leases when they do a 3-year lease. But they're happy to lease you for a longer term. The landlords almost never want you to move. They just want you to stay, and they put the escalation clauses right in the contract. Also, I want to let you know my travel schedule a bit, because if you would like to schedule a one-on-one mentoring or coaching session with me, you can do that. Just reach out to one of our investment counselors through jasonhartman.com. They'll get that all arranged for you. Where am I going? Where am I going to be? We can meet in person. Why didn't I think of this before as I was traveling around to offer this? Because, of course, we do these sessions on Zoom all the time. They're very reasonably priced, and I can really help you do a portfolio makeover. I can help you with whatever questions you have, just one-on-one. But you do have the opportunity to do it in person as well. So I am in Denver now. I'm off to Las Vegas today because we're hosting the Collective Inner Circle Mastermind there. And then I have a speaking engagement in Las Vegas next week. And then after that, I will be on my way to good old Orange County, California. So I'll be in Newport Beach. I'll probably head down to San Diego as well. And then I will be heading to Miami for another speaking engagement. And by the way, if you're interested in joining me in Miami at this conference, you can actually get a free ticket because I'm a speaker. So I've got a limited number of free tickets. Just look in the description for this video, and there will be a link in there, or look in the show notes for the podcast, and there's a link in there. This is the Global Citizenship Week. I'm the keynote speaker opening the event. And if you're interested in a plan B, a second passport, residency in a different country, offshore planning, asset protection, things like that, this may be of interest to you. It'll be in Miami at the end of the month, and I will be the keynote speaker. I've got some free tickets that I'm just going to give away to our audience here. So look in the show notes or the podcast description for a link and some information on that in Miami. But you can also arrange a one-on-one meeting with me in Miami. And then after that, I'm headed to Austin, Texas. I'll be at John Maxwell's mastermind session. John Maxwell, the author, he's fantastic. I got to share the stage with him speaking at another event a couple of weeks ago. And we are going to his mastermind event there, which will be nice. And then I'm also having a kind of a cool lunch with none other than Lance Armstrong. You know that name, Tour de France, Lance Armstrong in Austin, Texas as well. So I'll be there for a few days. And if you'd like to meet with me one-on-one in any of these places, just reach out to our investment counselors through jasonhartman.com, or if you're already in touch with one, and they'll be glad to arrange a one-on-one coaching session in person. Otherwise, we do those on Zoom regularly, so you can do that as well.